My father died on a Tuesday in October, or at least, that's what I was told. 2 weeks later, I drove 4 hours to a city I had never visited, knocked on a door I didn't know existed, and met a woman who called my father her husband. She was still wearing black. So was I. Here's what happened. My father's name was Robert Callahan, 64 years old, retired engineer, quiet man, the kind of father who showed up to everything, birthdays, school plays, Sunday dinners, but somehow always felt slightly out of reach, like there was a version of him you were never quite getting. I was his only child. My mother passed when I was 12. After that, it was just the two of us for 30 years. I thought I knew him. I was wrong. He died, I thought, of a heart attack, alone in his house on a Tuesday morning. Neighbor found him. I got the call at work, drove 3 hours to his house, and spent the next 5 days doing what you do. Funeral arrangements, phone calls, paperwork, the brutal, mechanical work of closing a life. On the 6th day, I started clearing out the house. That's when I found the drawer. It was in his bedroom, bottom left, tucked behind a stack of old bills. Nothing special about it, just a small wooden box, the kind you'd keep cufflinks in. But when I opened it, there was no jewelry inside. There were 2 sets of keys. One I recognized. House key, car key, the spare to the storage unit he kept on the edge of town. The other set I had never seen before. Different cuts, different weight. And attached to the ring, a small paper tag in his handwriting. It said, Elmwood, 14 Birch Lane. I stood there in that bedroom for a long time. Elmwood is a town 4 hours north. I told myself it was probably a rental property, maybe an old storage unit, maybe something from before I was born. I told myself a lot of things standing in that bedroom, but I already knew I was going to drive there. I went the next morning, didn't tell anyone, just put the address in my phone, got in the car, and drove. 4 hours. Mostly highway. The kind of drive where your hands are on the wheel, but your mind is somewhere else entirely. I pulled onto Birch Lane just after noon. Number 14 was a small house. White siding, green shutters. A flower bed that someone had clearly tended for years. A wind chime on the porch that I somehow already hated. There was a car in the driveway with a black ribbon on the mirror. I sat outside for about 10 minutes, just watching, telling myself I could still drive away, that whatever was behind that door didn't have to become my problem. Then I got out of the car. A woman answered on the second knock, early 60s, dark hair going gray, red eyes from crying. She was wearing a black blouse and holding a mug of tea like it was the only thing keeping her upright. She looked at me and her face did something strange. "You must be Thomas," she said. I had never met this woman in my life. "How do you know my name?" I asked. She opened the door wider. "Because you look exactly like him," she said. "He told me about you. He just never told me when I'd meet you." Her name was Margaret, and she had been married to my father for 19 years. I sat at her kitchen table and she made me coffee and we talked for 3 hours. The whole time I kept waiting to feel something. Rage, grief, shock. But mostly I just felt like I was watching it happen to someone else. Like the floor had been pulled out so slowly I hadn't noticed until I was already falling. Margaret wasn't angry. She was devastated. Not just by his death, by this. By me sitting in her kitchen. By 19 years of a life that had apparently been built on a foundation she didn't know was hollow. She showed me photos. My father at her kitchen table. My father at what I now understood was their anniversary dinner. My father at a Christmas I had spent with him 3 states away, thinking he was home alone, telling me he was tired and wanted a quiet holiday. The dates matched. He had done both. I drove home that night in silence. No music, no phone calls. Just 4 hours of highway and the particular silence of a man who has just had every assumption about his own life rearranged. But here's the part I haven't told you yet. Because when I got home, I sat down at my kitchen table and I did what I always do when something doesn't add up. I started looking. My father was an engineer, careful, precise, methodical. A man who kept records of everything. I had his laptop. I'd taken it from the house to deal with the estate. I hadn't opened it beyond the basics. That night, I opened everything. It took me about 2 hours to find the folder. It wasn't hidden exactly, just filed under a name I wouldn't have recognized before that day. Elmwood. Inside were 19 years of documents, a second mortgage, a second insurance policy, a second will, and a second folder inside the first one, labeled simply 3. I stared at that label for a long time, then I clicked it. There was a third address, different city, different state, a woman named Carol, and a folder of documents going back 26 years, 3 years before he met Margaret, 7 years before he met me. I closed the laptop, sat in my kitchen in the dark, and understood for the first time that my father had not died. He had disappeared. I found him 11 days later. I won't tell you exactly how. It took a private investigator, a forensic accountant, and a detail buried in the third insurance policy that his lawyer hadn't caught. But I found him, living quietly in a small town in another state, under a name that was almost but not quite his own. He had planned it for years. The heart attack was a story, a convincing one, built on a medical history he had carefully constructed with a cooperative doctor who I will not name because that is a separate and ongoing legal matter. 3 families, 3 lives, 1 exit strategy. He thought he had closed all 3 doors at once. He had forgotten that doors have locks. And I had the keys. I called him from a parking lot on a Wednesday afternoon. He answered on the 3rd ring. There was a pause when he heard my voice, a long one. "Thomas," he said finally. "I've spoken to Margaret," I said, "and to Carol." Another pause, longer this time. "I can explain." "I don't need an explanation," I said. "I need you to understand something. Margaret's attorney has everything. Carol's attorney has everything. And your estate, both of them, is currently under fraud investigation in 3 states. I paused. "I'm not calling to fight with you. I'm calling so you know that it's over." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Are you okay?" And that was the thing that almost broke me, because he meant it. Even then, even caught, even with everything collapsed around him, he was asking if I was okay. That was still my father. That piece of him was still real. "No," I said honestly, "I'm not." Then I hung up. The legal process took 8 months, fraud charges in 2 states. The estate was restructured. Margaret and Carol were both protected. There were things that couldn't be undone. Years, memories, the specific grief of loving someone who turned out to be partially invented. But there were things that could be made right, and we made them right. Here's something I didn't expect. Margaret and I still talk. Not often, maybe once a month. She sends me photos sometimes, old ones from before she knew. The 2 of us looking at the same man from opposite sides of a life he built between us. It's strange. It's also, in some way I still don't fully understand, a comfort. We are the only 2 people in the world who know exactly what it felt like to sit at his table and believe it was the whole story. Carol is harder. She had children with him, 2 daughters who are now adults and who deserved none of this. Their grief is a different shape than mine. I give them space, but I left the door open. As for my father, he pled guilty. He's serving time. We don't speak. I went back to his original house once, after the estate was settled. Stood in the kitchen where I had spent 1,000 Sunday mornings. Tried to find the man I thought I knew in the corners of that room. He wasn't there, but I was. And I think that's the thing I keep coming back to. The thing that matters most when someone you love turns out to be a stranger. You don't disappear with them. You stay. You deal with what's real. You find out who you are when the story you thought you were living turns out to be someone else's fiction. I am my father's son. I have his eyes, his hands, his habit of going quiet when things get hard. I used to think about that with pride. I still do, actually, just differently now. Because whatever he was, whatever shape his life really had, he raised someone who, when faced with an impossible thing, didn't look away. Didn't run. Didn't fall apart. Just got in the car, drove 4 hours, and knocked on the door. That part is mine, and nobody can take it back.